The Coca-Cola 600 coming up on Sunday means a unique night for NASCAR DFS because usually for a 1.5 mile track, which is what Charlotte is, you get to kind of have some freedom. You don't have to go as hard at lap sled as a short track and stuff like that. But Sunday is a 400 lap race at a 1.5 mile track, which creates a really unique dynamic for NASCAR DFS. We'll break down that dynamic and get you set for Sunday's race right now. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to preview the Coca-Cola 600 from a DFS perspective and get you set for Sunday's race based on the salaries and the rules over at FanDuel.com. Because it is a later race, lock is later as well. It's at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. So extra time to fill out lineups. We do have practice. That'll be tonight, Friday. Friday night is practice. We'll have qualifying on Saturday. So unlike last week, you have a full 20 or 40, 30 something hours or whatever. I don't know. Not good at math. 30 something hours to fill out lineups after qualifying on Saturday. So plenty of time to fill out optimal lineups. We'll talk about how starting position matters. We'll talk about what to do with practice data and all that in today's podcast. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. No matter where you get your podcasts, we are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever it may be, you can find us. Make sure you leave a rating and review as well. We have PGA back with Brandon and myself next week, MLB DFS podcast every weekday. And of course, next week, Austin Swain is back with more UFC. So a lot of good reasons to make sure you are subscribed there. Hey, soccer fans, this season, FanDuel and Captain Morgan are teaming up to give you a one-of-a-kind soccer contest. Introducing Captain Morgan's Soccer Pick'em, a weekly fantasy contest that's entirely free to play. The contest is simple. All you have to do is make quick predictions for Saturday games this soccer season. You'll earn points for each correct pick and compete for a chance to win up to $3,000 in prizes every single week. Head over to FanDuel and enter the Captain Morgan Soccer Pick'em today. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply, and don't forget to make your game day more delicious and sub in the captain. Let's take a look at the optimal strategy for Sunday's race. And I think it is a good week where if you are good at evaluation, good at deciding which cars will be fast, this is a good race for you because it is a 400 lap race, which means it's basically a short track from a DFS perspective where we need to prioritize lap leaders. The good thing for us is that we don't necessarily need those drivers to start right at the front of the field. In fact, a lot of recent Coca-Cola 600s, those drivers have not started up front. Back in 2019, there was qualifying. Martin Truex Jr. and Brad Keselowski led more than 75 laps after starting 14th or lower. Last year, Alex Bowman led 164. He started 12th. And that's because passing is possible here. It's not like an easy track to pass at. Like if you're talking about this from a strict NASCAR Cup Series perspective, passing is not easy. But because the race is so long, you have enough time to get there. You can make those passes and work your way towards the front. So even if you start outside the top 10, you can still lead laps. Let's say that Kyle Larson, I love him. He's great. For Sunday's race, let's say he starts 14th. It doesn't matter. You can still lock him into your lineup and consider him as a possible lap leader because this race is so long. There are 4 stages. You've got a lot of time to work your way forward and lead laps. Usually when we think about lap leaders, we're thinking about where they're starting. And it makes sense because it is objectively easier to lead laps when you're starting at the front than when you're starting at the back. But here, we can be more open-minded. We can think of them in terms of upside and speed rather than where they're starting. So I think you need 2 studs in each lineup with the upside and the speed to lead laps. That is a must given the length of this race. There are 2 additional caveats, 2 additional notes here, I should say, with regards to lap leaders. The first one is that the waves strategy is in play. We talked about this for, I think it was Martinsville a couple weeks ago, where you want to get drivers in waves. Last year, Kurt Busch led more than 50 laps from the pole. Kyle Busch led more than 70 laps from 3rd place the year before that. So there are still advantages to starting up front. So if you want to use someone, let's go with the Larson starting in 14th example. Let's say he's starting 14th. maybe consider pairing him with a driver inside the top 5 or so, the top 2 rows, and use them in addition to Larson. That way you can get the lap sled early and the lap sled later once Larson gets to the front. I think that is a justifiable strategy for this week, even though you don't need a guy starting inside the top 4 necessarily, but it doesn't hurt to have those lap sled throughout the entire race. The second thing to note is that it does increase the value of mid-range drivers with upside. We talk about this at tracks like Dover, tracks like Martinsville, where trying to identify drivers in the 9,000 or 10,000 range who can lead laps is extra valuable this week. We may not feel like super safe with the floor of guys like William Byron, Alex Bowman, or Christopher Bell if they start up front, but if they've got the upside to lead laps, there's big appeal in them this week. I think Byron, Bowman, and Bell could win. So, there's definitely upside there. If you can jam in a third lap leader without breaking the bank and having to punt, that's massive for your upside. So I am going to actively be seeking out drivers in the 9,000 range, the 10,000 range, with the upside to lead laps, because the value in them is increased this week given the number of laps to be run inside the race. Look at them long and hard, that range extra valuable this week compared to what it usually is. So that's how we handle our 2 or 3 studs for this week. Make sure they have the upside to lead laps. You need big points here, and that's how you get them at this track. For the value plays, even with qualifying, we should get some place differential opportunities. Last year, 3 drivers made the perfect lineup after starting outside the top 25, and there was qualifying before that race. The year before, 2 guys made it starting 22nd or lower. So you have to make sure they're fast enough. You have to make sure they have speed, but you can get place differential here because this race is so long. There will be a bit more attrition just because there's more time for drivers to have mechanical issues. Probably not going to be a lot of wrecks because Charlotte is a pretty stable, pretty tame track, but just mechanical stuff, additional time for people to run into issues, that could naturally increase the place differential upside for drivers who are fast enough starting further back. As far as the speed component goes, the biggest races to determine speed are Kansas and Las Vegas. Those are the 2 races this year on 1.5 mile tracks with lesser tire wear. Charlotte doesn't have a lot of wear, about a second fall off over a run. So that pushes the value of Kansas and Vegas up. You can also look at Atlanta and Homestead, but the tire wear there does make them different. So got a 4-race sample on the 1.5-mile tracks this year. In the 550 package. I'll be looking at all of those, try to determine who will be fast this weekend. But I'll especially be emphasizing Kansas and Las Vegas due to the minimal tire wear there. You'll also be able to utilize practice times on Friday night. We should get both single lap runs, and I would bet at least 5-lap averages. Most of the field should get to a 5-lap run. So take that information in, value it, and see who is fast. Just don't let it overrun your priors. Current form still matters here. Back in 2019, they had 3 practice sessions before the Coke 600. Seems like a totally wildly different world where they had 3 practice sessions. But even then, when there were 3 practices, the current form section of my model still outperformed practice in terms of predicting both finishing position and average running position. There's only 1 practice session this year. So practice does matter, and I will have it inside my model, and it can help us a lot in determining who will be fast. Just don't overweigh it and forget about current form. So practice matters, but don't ignore everything else and just sell out to roster drivers who are fast in practice. So to recap, strategy for Sunday's race. You want at least 2 studs who can lead laps per lineup. Doesn't matter too much where they start. I would say if someone's starting dead last, if they don't run a qualifying lap, you definitely want to use the weight strategy there. But if it's 8th or whatever, you can probably just use that guy as your highest starting person and pair them with another lap leader 9th or whatever. I would try to jam in a mid-range play with upside to lead laps when you can, Bell, Byron, Bowman. Blaney's kind of there, all the Bs. He's kind of there too. He's $11,000, a little bit higher, but those are the guys I'd be thinking about there. Look for place differential in your value plays. We should get it. So check it out. Despite qualifying, we should still have some guys starting deeper than they should be. I would look most at Vegas and Kansas when trying to judge current form, who will be good for this race, but also look at Homestead and Atlanta and value what we saw there. Finally, weigh in practice times, but don't overreact to them. That's kind of the key tenets for this week. So Should be a fun race. It's very different than most mile-and-a-half tracks, but I think it is one that sets up well for this weekend. So let's go tier by tier and break down my favorite drivers for this weekend based on the salaries at FanDuel.com. Again, with the caveat that this could change after practice on Friday night. I'll have the data sheet up on numberFire.com. I'll put practice times in there, and it'll account for that. So check out that on Saturday, probably late-ish morning. I'll update that. Check that out if you want to see practice times. But as of right now, here are the guys I'll be watching most closely this weekend. The elite tier is Martin Truex Jr. at $14,500, through Denny Hamlin at $12,500. And like if we could bet over under laps led, I would go to Kyle Larson's number. If it were under like 100, I'd probably take the over because he's probably going to dominate this race. I don't know if he'll win. I think there is value in betting him at plus 550, but he's got so much upside for DFS specifically. He's had a top 5 average running position in all 4 relevant races this year. He won one of them. He's led I think 360 something more laps than anybody else across those 4 races this year. So he needs to be the prime focus for DFS this weekend. He may not win because it's a super long race and a lot of stuff can happen. He's never won a 500-mile race, much less a 600-mile one. But I think that Larson might lead enough laps where he could finish 7th and still be a good play for DFS. Like if he gets you 20 bonus points on FanDuel for leading 200 laps, 7th is okay. So Larson, to me, is the focal point for Sunday's race. Regardless of what happens to him in qualifying or practice, he will be a focal point for me. Truex is number 2 for me straight up based on my win simulations, but I will say that Denny Hamlin has outperformed Truex in both Vegas and Kansas. So I am very receptive to pushing Hamlin above Truex, especially at a $2,000 discount. I don't care too much about what those guys do in practice. I did a study last year about practice times, and they tend to be less predictive of speed during the race with older drivers than with younger drivers. So Truex and Hamlin, both 40 plus. Doesn't matter too much for me how fast they are in practice. I think it'll be Hamlin above Truex for me. So to me, this tier is Larson 1, Hamlin 2 after accounting for the discount, Truex is 3, Kyle Busch 4, and Chase Elliott 5 entering practice on Friday. The second tier is Brad Keselowski at $12,000, through Alex Bowman at $10,000. And it's not a bad tier at all. I actually think it's pretty solid, which makes me feel better about jamming in Larson. If I can get 2 guys in this tier with Larson, sweet. The favorite guy for me in this tier, in a shock to literally not a single soul who has ever listened to the Heat Check, I should say, it's Ryan Blaney. He and Brad Keselowski are similar, where they both ran well at Vegas and Kansas. Joey Logano did not. Logano, he gets a pretty big downgrade in this 550 package, but Blaney, $1,000 discount from Keselowski. Blaney is, I would say, more likely to dominate a race than Keselowski, so I like his laps led upside, and that's enough for me to rank him above Keselowski in this tier. I also really like the 2 Hendrick cars here, Bowman and Byron. Again, talked about them before as being mid-range guys who could lead this race. Byron has been great in this package. He won Homestead. He's had a top 10 average running position in all 4 races. He also had a top 8 mark in 2 of the past 3 races at Charlotte. So I think that Byron's a good win bet at 16-1. As far as Bowman goes, he dominated this race last year, about 164 laps. He hasn't been as good in this package this year. He seems to excel most when there is tire wear, and obviously that's not the case this weekend, which is why I prefer Byron, but Bowman is in play too. So this tier to me is ranked Blaney 1, Byron 2. I'll go Keselowski 3, Bowman 4, Joey Logano 5, Kevin Harvick 6. I think Harvick is overvalued from a win odds perspective. He's about right for DFS, but from a win odds perspective, it's hard for me to see him dominating. So he goes 6th in this tier. I wouldn't expect him to be super fast in practice on Friday either. The mid-range on FanDuel is Matt DiBenedetto at $9,500, through Austin Dillon at $8,500. And this one, this tier, I think, has probably one guy who could lead some laps, and that's Christopher Bell. He's $9,200. He had an awesome run in Texas last year while he was driving for Levine Family Racing and has much better equipment now. He ran well in Las Vegas. He had more speed in Kansas than his finish would indicate. So I'm expecting that Bell will qualify well. He's probably not going to be a guy to get his place differential, but let's say he qualifies 5th, I would not rule out Bell as being a guy who could run up front, maybe push to lead some laps, and potentially finish well too. So I think that Bell, even if he does qualify well, still in play for DFS this weekend. Matt DiBenedetto, Kurt Busch, Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick are all contenders for a top 10 finish. I'm not opposed to any of them. My model likes DiBenedetto most. I kind of thought he was oversalaried when I looked at the salary pool, but like it makes sense, I guess, still. I still think he's oversalaried, but like it makes sense. He ranks 11th in projected average running position in my model. He has the highest top 10 odds of anybody in this group, actually above Bell, I believe. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but like, whatever. DiBenedetto was very fast in Texas last year. Good speed in both Kansas and Vegas. Finished fourth in Kansas. So $9,500, probably higher than it should be, but still, I think DiBenedetto, good play. This tier, the guy I think that I'm like higher on than consensus is probably Austin Dillon. He's $8,500. Dillon had a top 9 average running position in both Charlotte races last year. He won Texas. He had a 10th place average running position in the second Texas race. So this track type, very good to him. He and Tyler Reddick, they both tend to have really good pit strategy on tracks with low tire wear. They have like this really sick analytics program via Pit Row, which is like a web. It used to be like a fantasy NASCAR website, but now they like run analytics for teams. It's great. Like I have a Pit Row jacket in my closet. They're awesome. So I'm a huge fan of them. It works out really well on tracks like this with low tire wear. So I would like to be overweight on Dillon depending on where he qualifies. But if anybody in this tier were to qualify poorly, they would be core plays for me. I have enough faith in the speed of all these guys in this mid-range to feel good about them this weekend. The ranking for me is Bell 1, DiBenedetto 2. I'll go Dillon 3, Reddick 4, Kurt Busch number 5. The value tier is Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at $7,700 through Chris Buescher and Michael McDowell at $6,500. Stenhouse is actually the highest ranked guy in my model in this tier, which kind of like DiBenedetto surprised me a bit, but it makes sense. He had an 11th or has had an 11th place average running position in 2 of the past 3 races at Charlotte. He's been good in this package, so I'm fine with him. I think it makes sense. I'm on board with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 600 miles, a long time to ask Recchi to avoid wrecks, but, whatever. Let's do it. The guy I'm most interested in this tier, though, is actually the guy who replaced Stenhouse at Roush Fenway in Chris Buescher. Buescher has had more speed at tracks this year with heavy tire wear than with low tire wear. He was awesome in both Atlanta and Homestead, but it's not like he was bad in Kansas and Las Vegas. He also finished 8th in Kansas, so he's not a dud. He ranks 1 spot below Stenhouse in my model and is $1,200 lower salaried, so I love that. Buescher, to me, a really good value play to help you jam in a mid-range driver with Larson or Truex or Hamlin. I'm going to value practice quite a bit in this tier, so maybe the Stewart-Haas guys can figure something out with practice sessions in back-to-back weeks. I am receptive to them if they show up. I just am not going to make the assumption that they will. So for right now, I'm going to rank this tier Buescher 1, Stenhouse 2, Almirola 3, Custer 4, Michael McDowell 5. But again, if Almirola and Custer show speed, I'll bump them up. I just want to see it before I assume it happens. The punting tier this week is not bad, I'll say. It's Ross Chastain and Chase Briscoe at $6,000 on down. And there are 5 guys in this tier I am at least receptive to. Ryan Newman's one of them. He's similar to Buescher, because they're teammates. He's been better with the heavy tire wear. So I think I'm more into Buescher than Newman, but like he's $5,500. If he shows anything in practice, I'll be there. The guy I think is most interesting, though, is Daniel Suarez. His crew chief, Travis Mack, is really creative with pit strategy this year. Like it's not always optimal, but it's different. And I think that different can win you races at Charlotte. I'm not saying he's going to win, but like it can get you a good finish. So I would not be shocked if Suarez maneuvers his way into a good run this week. He's only $5,500. I like that a lot. I'm also receptive to Ross Chastain. Good run in Kansas. Had some speed in Charlotte in previous years when his team was really bad. So that's interesting to me. Bubba Wallace is $5,000. Chase Briscoe is $6,000. Bubba may benefit this week from having practice time because it's a brand new team. No practice time, no time with his crew chief, Mike Wheeler. So I think that I am broadly receptive to this tier. Right now, I'd probably rank it Suarez 1, Chastain 2, Newman 3, Wallace 4, Briscoe 5. But all 5 of them are in play depending on what happens this weekend with practice and qualifying. So the punting tier is not bad. So I think that jamming in a Blaney, Byron, Bowman, Bell, BBBBB as your third ranked driver this week, fully in play, or getting two of those guys with Larson, et cetera, you can make it happen given the value plays available on this slate. Let's finish up here with picks to win for the Coca-Cola 600. I'm going to go with Kyle Larson at the top. I know there is some risk around the fact that he has not won a longer race in his career, but he has not been with Hendrick very long either. So I think that getting him at Hendrick, he's going to dominate this race. It's a FOMO type thing for me. So I'm going to go Larson 1. Among the guys below $10,000, technically Christopher Bell is the best win odds in my simulations, but I think I've picked Bell like every week. So let's change it up. We'll go Austin Dillon. I have faith in the pit strategy they have. He won here a couple years ago, partly because of that. And he's also been good on this track type. So it's not totally out there. I'm not betting Dillon to win. I think he's a great top 10 bet at plus 200, but I'm not going to bet him to win. But if I'm picking someone below 10,000, let's go Austin Dillon and have some fun there. That is all the time that we have here for today. Again, should be a fun race. Don't overreact to practice on Friday. Don't overreact to qualifying on Saturday either. We know who should be fast this weekend. Value the current form, value stuff like that, and make logical plays for Sunday. But overall, just put your evaluator hat on and have a good time filling out lineups. If you have additional questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Again, MLB DFS podcasts up every weekday there for the solo shot. PGA and UFC back next week as well. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for setting up the video broadcast for today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Have a great race on Sunday. Be safe. And we'll talk to you all once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.